Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Allsop Prop Chat. This one doesn't focus on a commercial auction. It focuses on what we're going to be calling Achieving the E, understanding the EPC, Energy Performance Certificate, and what 5 easy wins you can do to help you understand the implications of the changing legislation around EPCs and how they impact you as either an investor or a tenant. Today I've got with me Ben Hodge from the auction team, who's in a very wet and windy Brighton. Morning, Ben.
Morning, George.
And Martin Zambrano from Lewis and Bell, who we've worked with probably for 10 or 12 years.
Good morning, Ben. Good morning, George.
And do you know how many EPCs you guys have done the last 10 years?
We're averaging somewhere in the region of about 150 or so per month for various different clients.
So you're looking at your website before we jump into it. I mean, I saw that the Coors Brewery example. That's quite an interesting one. But also 2 big projects you guys have done for the Southern Co-op, looking at over 200 stores.
Yes,
that's from a tenant's perspective. I assume that was slightly about how they can meet legislation, but all about energy efficiency itself and pound, shilling, and pence.
It is. I mean, we're fortunate with the Southern Co-op, and we also do work for Pizza Hut restaurants as well around the country. In the sense that they were driven very much by looking at the legislation which is forthcoming, and you know that people are now talking about in certain different dates, which we'll mention later, of course. And what they wanted to do was prepare their estate to make sure that they had the best possible rating for their stores. A lot of the properties they had, which maybe were empty, or they were looking for new tenancies in there, and what action plan they needed to put in place. And, you know, going back to what we're going to talk about today, is that they wanted to see what the best possible ways or what the top tips were for trying to achieve the best possible rating. And that worked particularly well because they were really ahead of the game. They started on this in about 2019, I think it was. And they've been working on their estate ever since. And we get involved with them on some of their new stuff as well, where they're looking for refurbishments. They're doing a lot of work with a Starbucks brand. They're opening a few franchises, and we get involved very much at the early implementation of shop fittings or spec and layout, so that they know that they're getting the best possible rating at the very beginning, even before the doors are open.
And well, I shouldn't labour the point. Energy bills are on everyone's mind, and this is not just about ticking boxes. This is about occupational costs, isn't it? In as much as business rates plus rent is occupational costs.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Ultimately, that we can show that by having an efficient building, it makes sense to think that your energy bills are going to be affected by that. We've seen that already. Anecdotally speaking to clients who have gone through simple LED lighting refurbs, you speak to them about how they've seen the impact on that. It's immediate. They say, "God, yeah, we've seen that in our energy bills."
You mentioned the EPC as it stands. A real brief summary. And I think the point about it is it doesn't give direction particularly. But so EPC, what have we got? A to F categories, is that right?
Yeah, it's A to G. And one thing which I speak to a lot of people about is that it rates the building. So it's not really it doesn't rate how much energy that building uses. So it's what are the energy efficiency properties of that particular build. So how much insulation does it have if it's a 1930s and 1940s built property? What are the constituent parts? What kind of heating? What kind of lighting? Not necessarily about the condition of it. I mean, we speak to clients who say, "Oh, I've got a brand spanking new boiler." Great, that's fantastic. We'll look at the efficiency of that. Others who cower away and say, "Oh, I don't, it's a pretty poor boiler." Well, that might be the case. It may look battered and torn, but we're not interested in its condition. We're interested in the efficiency of that particular piece of equipment, and also what other things work alongside it as well. Because you can have the best boiler in the world, but if you've got all the windows open and you've got an air conditioning unit kicking off cooling and you've got the boiler turned on, well, what's the point having the 100% efficient boiler if all it's doing is just heating the outside world?
The way I've seen it, Martin, and you might disagree, is actually it looks at a building's demand for energy as well as the type of energy it consumes. Those two parts.
It is a little, yeah. It is, and I'm going to contradict myself. It's really about what type of building is it. So is it an office? Is it a retail? Is it a hotel? Because all those 3 things, they can be identical in every single shape and size. but they are judged differently. So if you have a retail space that is exactly the same as an office space, and they both have identical heating and cooling, then the retail space will be judged slightly differently to the office. So one of the things to consider as well is sometimes when you look at the existing EPC that you had, maybe that was done 9 or 10 years or so ago, there's a line on there that says that asks you building type. And sometimes the assessor, by the very early beginning of the legislation, may have said, well, actually, this is an office workshop, when in fact it's possibly a storage or distribution area. Or if you're looking at a travel agent or an estate agent on the high street, would you say that's a retail space, or because it's being used as an office, is it an office space? So that in itself could alter the rating simply because the assessor has chosen to tip one particular box rather than the other.
So make it clear what type of property you have.
And that leads back to having the right and current EPC. So the deadlines on the immediate horizon is, we call the podcast Achieving the E. Am I right? Yes. You've got to everything needs to be E-registered by 1st of April next year.
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, that particular minimum energy efficiency standard came in 2018, and which made everybody start looking at the EPC a lot closer, because it became obvious that you had to have at least an E to be able to let it.
The next jump to a C is not for 27, so that gives a bit more breathing space.
That's right. I mean, there's now gives you enough time to start thinking about what can you do to achieve that C rating.
Now, Martin, sorry, just to touch upon the 2023 impending deadline. At the moment, obviously an E can be achieved for a new letting. So that's the minimum energy efficiency standards, you say. Am I right in saying the change in 2023, April, is for existing leases as well?
Exactly. So if you've got an existing lease, you have to have at least achieved an E rating.
It's a good point, but from my understanding, an E is not that hard. I mean, most of the things we sell are certainly that bracket or above.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lower percentage of E's that we are seeing today than we ever have done, simply because, people have occupied their buildings for a number of years. They've, really, you can't go out and buy an inefficient heating system. You can't replace a light bulb with a less inefficient one than you had before. People are now installing energy efficiency lighting and heating by way of just upgrading what they had before, because it's gone out of date. It's just simply that we've evolved as a community, as a people, to actually start buying more efficient things, whether we like it or not.
Focus for today, the 5 easy wins. So what do you think? You've got a list of 5, Martin?
5, I'd say that to begin with, the easiest one, and the one that people always talk to me about, is lighting. Now, the way that we are looking at shops and offices, it's an easy win. I mean, quite frankly, you can pop into your local B&Q or Homebase. Other DIY retailers are available, of course. And you can just simply pick off a shelf and retrofit an LED light bulb into your existing fitting. So there's no great need to start thinking about, having to spend tens of thousands of pounds on electrical refurbishments. And the returns you see on your electricity bills are really quite noticeable.
It makes a lot of sense. So come on, LED lighting, number 2.
Control systems. I mean, whether you're using a boiler which is, 5 years, 10 years old, or or a heating or cooling system, whatever that might be, you have to have some kind of controls within there. So timing controls, local thermostats. If you haven't got radiators with thermostatic controls on the valves on them, look to install them. Again, it's a relatively easy fit. Putting in these smart hive type meters, the ones that can control the room temperature on sort of room by room basis, or at least be able to say, well, actually, when a thermostat reaches 22 degrees in the summer, or 26 degrees in the winter, that's when to turn on, turn off, and obviously time controls within that as well. The other is often overlooked is hot water. Again, that's something which in some of the buildings that we see, you will sometimes find just uninsulated hot water cylinders, or maybe just really inefficient electric only uninsulated heating systems, hot water systems rather. Where possible, point of use, these little sort of 5, 10 or 15 litres Ariston systems which fit underneath sinks. If you have an office which has, kitchens, toilets, all those sort of areas, those little insulated, factory-fitted electrical systems, that is seen as a good tick box, certainly when we're doing calculations for an EPC assessment.
Brilliant.
For insulation, that's often sort of seen as the obvious one, but it does make a big change. Loft insulation. Now, obviously, it's difficult to put in cavity wall insulation into certain buildings, but internal insulations into maybe suspended ceiling in offices or flat roofs in small office extensions or retail extensions. It's something that we look at, but we sometimes find it very difficult to get either tenants or landlords to tell us whether there's actually any insulation within these buildings. Because in fairness, a lot of the clients that we do with Allsop never visited their buildings, don't know very little about them. They tell us to go and do the EPC, and then we're relying on the tenant to sort of give us information about the space that they're renting. And they may have done some work themselves, but what knowledge they have about the type of insulation that's in the roof or in flat roofs is very minimal, and we can't always get to those areas. So knowing what insulation there's in the building or in the office or the retail space is very important.
You've got a building that's going to become vacant and you're going to white box it. You do need to understand that. I suppose inherently people will think about it, but if they put it on their tick list now, tenant leaves or the new lease is in place, let's have a quick look.
Yes, exactly. And it's astonishing, really, because if you a layer of 100 mil insulation is improved up to 270 mil, that makes a big difference on the rating. And that's a roll of insulation which is easy to install or easy to put in. A local, DIY guy can just, get that done quite easily and quite inexpensively.
You've reminded me, Martin, to go into my loft later. What's the so if I were to do my EPC, I want to improve it. What's the fifth and final tidbit that you have?
The fifth and final one is it has to be with the information that you provide to the assessor, because there are certain defaults which are used when we're doing an EPC assessment. But the more information that you have about that building, the better it happens to be. So we are making a lot of guesswork when we're doing an EPC because with information we don't readily have to hand. If I was doing an EPC in your house, George, you'd be able to tell me how much insulation there was in the wall, what when the extension was built, what the heating system is, all of that information you'd be able to tell me, and you'd be quizzing me about, how that, why the energy rating isn't better than it is. So having all that local knowledge is incredibly important. So the more information you can tell us about your building, the better it will be.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Martin. Those are great 5 pieces there. Quick question to the two of you, 3 including myself. Out of those 5, how many have you done yourself for your own homes? George, let's start with you.
There's no question. LEDs. I'd like Martin. The first house I put 38 halogen light bulbs in the big kitchen living area, and almost immediately regretted it because it was 60 watts, and my house I currently live in, there's 6 watts. Yeah. 38 times 60 is awful. I mean, there were too many lights, but now 6 watts. That's a huge difference.
Yeah, and Martin, have you done all 5 of these yourself, or certainly 4 of them, because the information is a given for you?
Yeah, well, I've done all 4 of those again, but it was prompted by we just had a house extension, and so all of those things were really missing from my property. Like George, I had these halogen bulbs burning my head every time I walked underneath one. Replaced all those for LEDs. I've got a massive amount of insulation in my home at the moment. There's the walls, every single roof and every single cavity has now been fixed. Control systems are everywhere. I can turn them on and off when I'm not in the house because my children will no doubt turn the heating up. And
you're an absolute model for the EPC. It's brilliant.
Martin, you raised a good point earlier. A lot of people who buy from Ben and I will be income chasers, and they won't be dropping down to the local branch of Boots or the Halfords they own or the Screwfix. But they should get someone who understands it, and then just perhaps go one step further and get someone who get the maintenance team to really get the head around what is in the little trade warehouse. What is the installation? It looks modern. Is it as modern as it could be?
That's a really good point, George, because again, we've walked into buildings where the client has said to us, "Oh, we've just refurbished that office space, or we refurbished that shop, and we've put in new heating." And we walk in there, and the first thing we go is, "Oh my God, they've spent the money in the wrong place," because sometimes they're doing it to a budget. Of course they are, and sometimes the electrician or the contractor says, "Well, that's an office space. You need to put some heating in there," and they put in an electric panel heater, which is A-rated, which looks great on the box because it said it's an A-rated heater. But if they just put in something different, if they connected a simple AC system in that area rather than an electric heater, which is the worst type of heating you can put into an office, then that rating would have increased dramatically. And we often have to say, look, all you've done is you've made it worse. If you hadn't put that in there, it would have potentially made a better rating than it actually has. So
when it comes to lettability of buildings, whether it's shop, shed or office, we know tenants want to look they now look at occupational costs. And it's not just, our team in the city last week were telling us this, that the tenants are all aiming at these super efficient offices. But there's a lot of property that we've sold that isn't in that category. But what we're saying is a bit of common sense, but also greater understanding of the energy will ultimately lead to lower occupational costs from an energy point of view, which allows the landlord to charge more rent. Simple. And that's what our clients want to hear.
Well, thank you very much, Martin. And, for all those landlords and tenants out there, before you spend money doing up your building, please do ask if you're looking for an improved EPC. Martin's always available for that.
And I think the point is, Ben, isn't it, that we've got, if you own a building, you've got really till April next year to get it sorted, which gives you time.
Absolutely. You've got time to get to know your building, implement some of those five points that Martin raised. And if you do need advice, do just get in touch and, perhaps we could steer you in the right direction to achieve that E.
And we'd Absolutely. Like to encourage feedback from the audience, that if you've got, what was your top tip, podcasts@allsop.co.uk, and then we'll share it perhaps if we go into more detail on another podcast. But meanwhile, thank you, Martin from Lewis and Bell. Doesn't matter where you're based, or you've got a good website, Lewis and Bell, currently in Derbyshire. And Ben Hodge from Brighton. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, Martin.